Well, hello, people of Defend the House, and welcome back to another one of mine and Jameson's long, talky review videos. Usually, we try and do one of these a month, but the month of October is jam-packed to the brim, even leaking into the beginning of November. So we thought, instead of talking about 7 games for like 3 hours, we're going to split it into 2 videos. That's the aim anyway, 2 videos for now. Maybe it will even drip into 3 videos, who knows. But starting off, we are going through Shadow of War? What's it called?
Yes.
Shadow of War.
You got it.
The Evil Within 2 and South Park, The Fractured Butthole. We're going to do it chronologically. I haven't actually played Shadow of War. I never even finished the first game, which was Shadow of Mordor?
Yes.
I don't know, they just blend together.
It's so weird that they just changed the one word in the title. Yeah,
I didn't beat the first one. I liked the first one, but it just didn't grab me enough to see it through to the end. And I didn't want to jump into the sequel without seeing the first one all the way through, so I kind of left it on the back burner for now. There's enough for me to play, so I left this to you. So you're going to take this review away and tell me about Shadow of War, which I'm interested in because there's been some controversy around this title. Specifically about loot boxes, but obviously we won't get too into it. I will let you take it away and do it as you wish.
Okay. The concept of having to see the first game through to the end is hilarious to me, by the way.
What do you mean?
Because, well, I don't know, like, what is there to see through? I
don't know. I'm just a completionist, you know?
That's fair, yeah. Well, there's not a lot... Well, okay. In theory, there's not a lot different between the two, because it's just, it's just like, oh, they made another game and expanded some of it. Mm-hmm. But then in practice, it turns out I don't know, there's a lot that's changed between these two games. Not necessarily like in functionality, but more like, oh, we added a bunch of stuff to it, which we'll get to.
Yeah, from what I saw, it looked a bit clunkier and full to the brim with systems and icons than the last game.
Yeah, the first game we reviewed, there's a standalone review for it. We liked it. I enjoyed that game. It came out in a year where there weren't a lot of really good games.
It was a nice surprise.
Yeah, it was one of those games that, I remember leading up to it. It was like, I don't expect this to be anything at all. And it came out and it was good. It was a Assassin's Creed Batman combo that played more or less as well as those games. Maybe not as, like, the combat's not as tight as Batman, but, it was very Assassin's Creed-like, but on speed, let's say. Like, they did away with a lot of the bullshit and then added that Nemesis system, which was a cool thing, and still is. There's not really been, like, this whole generation, for the most part, it's like, games are bigger, and they look really good, but the fundamentals of them aren't that much different from last gen, especially, like, AI systems. There's never really been... I feel like the last AI thing from last gen was, Assassin's Creed 10 years ago, where it's like, wow, they have huge crowds, amazing. Yeah. And then it was just like nothing after that. And then the Nemesis system was the first, current gen AI innovation, and I would say still the only AI innovation this gen, which is maybe a little depressing.
Didn't it come out quite close to Alien Isolation as well?
It did, yeah. Alien, I would say as well, is maybe not an innovation, but a good trick, where it's like, Alien Isolation feels like they've done interesting things with AI, and they probably did.
That was a fun time.
That game, like, Wardor was... I've already called it Wardor.
I think you should clarify what Wardor means, because when you first mentioned it, I was like, what the hell is Wardor?
Well, I don't know. When I say Wardor, I think I more mean the current game, Shadow of War.
Yes.
But I also, in the context that I just used it as an all-encompassing term for both games, which is, a combination of Mordor and War. That game, both the games are very systems, like their AI systems are like really, front facing, whereas Alien Isolation, it was not. I remember when we reviewed that game, we talked about how overwhelming it was out of the gate. There was like no tutorializing. You just get thrown into the world, and there were like 18 different icons on the map. I remember that very clearly. But once you settled into it, it was a pretty simple game. It was 2 maps, some stuff to do on those maps, a pretty, let's say, relatively harmless and unengaging story, some good combat, and some neat sandboxy elements with AI to play with. And it worked. And I think a lot of Shadow of War works because those systems are still good and they're still interesting, and they've been some of them have been expanded. So I mean, the combat is, I would say, almost unchanged. I don't really remember any new abilities. I'm sure there are a ton of new abilities, but I like gameplay wise, it's just like, okay, this plays exactly like the first game. You get all of the powerful abilities that you spend the whole last game building up. You get all of them in like the first 2 hours, which is kind of nice. And then they just basically let you loose. And yeah, you mentioned it earlier. It's sort of, I have a wall of notes here, and I'm trying to figure out like where to start. You mentioned it earlier that there's a lot of stuff in the game.
Yeah.
And that is very much the case, and probably maybe the game's biggest issue out of the gate is like, there's so much shit in it.
Did they kind of Assassin's Creed 3 it? I don't think you play 3?
No, I only played like an hour of 3.
That was like the peak of the franchise, where they were like, more is better. Let's put in all these subsystems which you have to balance, which doesn't really mean anything, but it's more, so it's better.
Yeah, and it's not like AC Unity, which you didn't play, but I did, where the map is so cluttered with stuff. It's not like there's an insane, absurd amount of content or anything in this game. It's just that there are so many systems, and there's new stuff in this game. Includes a full loot system, gemstones that enhance the loot, fort capturing and fort defense, pinning the AI orcs against each other in fight pits. It just sort of and loot boxes and tiered epic and legendary level orcs that you can get. There's like, you can now take a regular orc and basically like game the game and have it kill you over and over again, because the higher tier the orc gets, the better the loot is when you kill it. Weird. So you can have it kill you, and then you can maybe send him a death threat, and then have it kill you again, and then you'll have like legendary loot when you kill him eventually.
That doesn't sound intentional.
No. I would say it is.
Weird.
But it is weird. It's a weird game. I was still getting tutorial messages like 15 hours in of new things being introduced. They really overwhelm, I would say, with new systems. It's just constantly, every hour or so, there's like a new set of dialogue pop-ups that say like, here's this system, here's how it works, here's a tutorial on how it works. And most of the time I would say that a game with more stuff is good, but it feels, a lot of it, or almost all of it, feels fairly unnecessary. Oh God, I don't know what I'm saying even. That's how I'm just thinking here, like where let me get the story stuff out of the way. Okay. There was a bit of controversy with Shelob, the giant evil spider, becoming a sexy lady, which is the case. It's very stupid. She is a sexy lady who is like an all-powerful being of some sort that can see the future and has existed for like all eternity and knows everyone of importance in that game, or in the lore of Lord of the Rings, which is really weird.
That sounds pretty good.
But like the story stuff is not very good in this game, which is maybe not a surprise because it was not very good in the first game, but it seems worse in this game. All of the writing in VO is like really uninteresting, which is fine. The worst part of the story stuff are the story missions, which for the first 15 hours, I would say, didn't bother me. Because you would just sort of do them every now and then, and they take like 5 minutes. And they're bad because they don't do anything interesting at all. Every one of them is just like, go rescue a couple guys and then kill the captain. Do this, poison the grog 3 times and then kill the captain. It's just like one objective, repeat it 3 to 5 times, and then kill a captain. That's every single story mission. Almost every single one of them. There's a few like set piece things, but... So you do that, and you're like, oh, whatever, that took 5 minutes. Now back to the other stuff, which is more interesting, which I'll get to. But then the last, like, 10 hours, they throw a lot of story missions at you that you kind of have to do because that's where all the XP is. And they have, like, these quest chains. There's, like, maybe 6 in total in the whole game, and, like, 3 of them come up in the last 10 hours. And... So I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to just finish the story stuff, get it out of the way. And there were 3 quest chains that I did, all one after the other. And each quest chain was, I don't know, 6, 8 missions long. And each mission was you doing the same thing. Ooh. So there's one quest chain where you're chasing a guy who betrayed you. And in every single story mission, you find him, and then he magically escapes from you. And then in the next mission, you find him again, and he magically escapes from you, and you repeat that 5 times, and then you kill him. And you're like, okay, that was a waste of time. There's another one, which I remember telling you about it, where you have to destroy... you have to go up to a totem. It's like a statue. You have to hold... I was playing on the controller. You have to hold B for probably 5 seconds, 6 seconds to destroy it, to kill all the enemies around it. Except if you get hit while you're doing that, you have to restart the animation, and all the enemies are around you, and the only way to kill them is by destroying the totem. So that was fun. You have to do that 3 to 6 times. No, 3 to 8 times? Maybe it's 3 to 6 times per mission. Ooh. And... it repeats 6 times. There are 6 or 7 missions, and you literally do the same thing in each mission, holding B on the totems while you try to not get hit. The story missions are just like, they're astonishingly lazy. Like they're just, here's a relatively interesting game with some good solid combat and neat systems where you do just the most mundane and unenjoyable story missions possible. Fuck, man. I'm still trying to figure out what to do. I don't even know where to keep talking about this game because it's so weird and so full of stuff. I'll say what I enjoyed.
Okay.
There are, like I said, 5 or 6 maps. They're all very small. Like, well, not very small, but they're pretty small. Much smaller than the ones in the first game, I think, from memory at least. And I thought, okay, they're small, so I enjoyed going around and getting all the, like, just cleaning the map of everything, like get all the collectibles, kill or possess a bunch of captains. I enjoyed the weird sort of mindless checklist nature of that because it was the fast traveling. There's no loading time, so it's like really quick to get around inside the zone. And I thought, oh, okay, if there's like, I don't know, a dozen of these little zones, I can see myself enjoying just sort of mindlessly doing that over and over again. There's only 5 or 6, which I thought was a little strange because by the 15-hour mark or so, I had cleared all of them of everything except for story missions, which was weird because I know leading into the reviews said the game is huge and really long. Which I did not find to be the case at all. I think I have 20 hours in it, and I basically finished it, aside from the 10-hour long grind.
Yeah.
anyways, I enjoyed the checklist sort of mindless nature of just running around the world doing things, fighting, climbing, collecting things. But it was over really quickly. It was like a dozen hours, and I had cleaned out the whole game of all of those things, which was strange and surprising. I still enjoy the combat. I still enjoy the climbing. Like, it's maybe not visually very nice to look at because it's sort of jittery and messy, but I like the combat and I like the climbing. I just yesterday played maybe 90 minutes of Assassin's Creed Origins, which we will talk about eventually.
Yeah.
And playing that reminded me why I liked Shadow of Mordor, and it reminded me that, oh yeah, I actually do enjoy the combat and climbing in Shadow of War because it just cuts out all the bullshit.
Yeah.
Playing AC Origins made me want to not play AC Origins and go play Shadow of War because it's a faster moving, much more video gamey version of the combat and climbing from Assassin's Creed. It's just fucking fast, which is nice. It's hard. I found it hard to go back to Assassin's Creed because I haven't touched an AC game in 2 years now, probably. And coming right off of Shadow of War into Origins made me really appreciate some of the quality of life stuff in the Middle-earth Shadow of whatever games, which I was surprised about because when I was finished with Shadow of War, I was like, I never want to play this game ever again.
Yeah.
And now having played Origins, I'm thinking, I wouldn't mind going and playing some Shadow of War because it sure is a lot more fast and enjoyable to play than this. That being said, I did feel like Shadow of War had a lot more moments like Assassin's Creed, where you want to jump straight and he just jumps to the left for no reason, or he doesn't climb, or he doesn't drop down. I had that happen a lot more in Shadow of War than I remember happening in Mordor, which is frustrating. I'm just looking at my notes here. Do you have any questions? I don't know. This game is so weird. It's such a giant clusterfuck.
No, I haven't really been thinking about it, to be honest.
No, nor have I.
I was kind of not sold on it by day one.
Yeah.
I just didn't really like the look of it. And while I think... Actually, I do have a question. Do they develop on the Nemesis system any more than the previous
Oh, God,
game?
right. Yeah. Yes. That's the best part of the game. Glad you brought that up. I probably would have found that in my notes somewhere. Yes, it's they've expanded on it substantially.
Okay.
They've made the Nemesis system the most interesting part of the game by making all sorts of changes to it. There's a much wider variety now of just general orc variants and attributes, weaknesses and strengths and aesthetics. That's all changed in some pretty interesting ways. They've expanded the number of ways that the orcs can interact with you in the world. For example, I didn't have this happen, but I've heard that if there's sometimes you can get killed by an orc and he breaks your sword.
Oh, wow.
And then he turns into, Ishmael's the sword breaker.
Yeah.
And you get a story mission where you have to go and kill him and take back the parts of the sword and reforge your sword.
Christ.
Which is pretty cool. I had a thing where I had a captain that was weak. I think it was he was terrified of Morgai flies, which Morgai flies are just they're like blood flies from Dishonored. They're just And terrified means if you shoot a nest of Morgai flies, he will just run away. He'll flee immediately and become immediately vulnerable to domination. So it's like a really, really good attribute when they're terrified of something. So he enters my area of battle or whatever, and I get his little intro that he's here. And he's close to a Morgai fly nest, and I shoot one. he becomes terrified and runs away, and I was unable to catch up with him because I was too far away. And so he escapes, and then a little while later, I can't encounter him again, and this poor son of a bitch, he has become infested with Morgai flies. His skin has this tumor on it, and his whole upper body is full of fly eggs, and they're coming out of his pores, and he's gone completely insane, and is now he's now called whatever, the infested or something like that, and he's just saying oh, I can't wait to fill you with flies, they're gonna rattle around inside you, or something like that, and it's oh shit, that's horrifying.
I mean, he was right to be scared of them.
Yes, and all the story voice acting is really bad and boring, but the orcs, they're so good. Their voice actors and their writing is so good on the orcs. They have such a good mix of personality and creepy. Some of the voice acting is really genuinely ugh, I don't want to be anywhere near you. The guy whoever was playing the infested orc did a fantastic job. So that element of the Nemesis system is expanded, and now they've also made it so that you can I think this part of it is new. I know one part of it is new, but I think the whole of it is new. You can now make captains spies, so they're basically an underling to one of the war chiefs, which, there's the tower or the fort or whatever, and there's the king of the fort, and then underneath him are the war chiefs, and then underneath them are captains. And so the war chiefs, you want to get rid of them so it makes taking the fort easier. They have 2 to 4 underlings. If you possess a captain who is an underling of a war chief, you can turn him into a spy who will continue working and being near the war chief, and then when you encounter the war chief, he will betray the war chief and start attacking him and stab him in the back and stuff like that. That, I think, is new.
Yeah. Then
there's the reverse of that, where the orcs that you've dominated can sometimes just betray you.
Oh.
I had an orc that there are now, the orcs, some of them will have blood brothers, which they're not actual brothers or anything, I don't think. I don't know orc families. But they're war brothers, are best friends, and if you kill the blood brother of one orc, the other one's going to get horribly mad and start coming after you, and if you encounter him, he's going to call you out on it and get enraged or something like that. So I kill the blood brother of one of the orcs and then possess the other one, and hours later, during one of the fort missions, he betrays me and says you killed my blood brother, you think I would listen to you? No chance, mate, and starts attacking me, something like that. All of that stuff is really excellent. And I think this is something that's come up. A lot of people, I think, have said this. I think the whole game would be better if they just fully embraced the video gaminess of it. Because there's a lot of aspects that, the combat, they just say oh, fuck you, it's a video game, who cares? There's no fall damage, you can run insanely fast, you can do these ridiculously overpowered moves, the Nemesis system, the whole thing, it's just it's a video game, who cares? Mm-hmm. But then they layer in all this other stuff, and just it gets in the way. I think if this game was just get rid of the Lord of the Rings, just make it fantasy, and just turn it into one of those battle simulator style games you see on Steam almost, where it's just just make it a sandbox, and you don't need to put story missions in it, you don't need to put tower defense stuff in it, just let me mess around with your weird Nemesis system.
Yeah.
I think it would be a better game if they did that. Obviously I understand why they don't do that, but it reminded me of Just Cause 3 in that, Just Cause 3 was a fantastic sandbox, and they improved on a lot of things from the original.
Yeah.
But they failed to make a good game surrounding it. The story missions were terrible, and the way they locked upgrades behind challenges, and they didn't make a good game with their sandbox. They didn't treat what good they had, they didn't treat it properly. And that feels like the same case with this game, where it's like you've made a really, really neat, really engaging sandbox game here, and then layered on like 5 other systems and a bunch of terrible story stuff that just gets in the way of me enjoying it. And if they had, I think they maybe could have left like the tower stuff in, maybe, but if it was just an open world game with some collectibles and a bunch of upgrades and just a nemesis system of some sort, maybe make it a little harder so you die more often, because I didn't die very much, which is unfortunate. I think they could have had a really neat thing here, but the result is just like, when I was done with it, I was just exhausted of playing it, and it was only 20 hours and it felt way longer. And it just sort of feels like a mix of squandered potential and bad decisions to make a game that's sort of... It's got a lot of enjoyable stuff in it. The moment-to-moment act of playing it is enjoyable. But overall, I just sort of felt tired when I was done with it.
Yeah.
I felt tired 12 or 13 hours into it, and then put another almost 10 hours into it and was exhausted by the end of it. And I wouldn't say it's a shame, because who fucking cares that much about Shadow of Mordor or Shadow of War? It just, in a way, almost feels like a game that didn't need to exist. Like, sort of like Just Cause 3, I don't know that they needed to make it. Just Cause 2 is pretty good. Shadow of War was a neat concept and well executed, but did they really need to make it? Maybe.
I would say it's a shame in terms of releasing the potential of the Nemesis system.
Yeah, I would
agree. The stuff that you've explained and the little stories it has created sounds really neat. But the other stuff you've explained has put me off so much that I don't know if I'll ever go in to see Nemesis 2.0. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it's a thing that most people need to play. And in a year that has so what's the word? I don't know. There have been so many games with great player stories over the last year. Hitman, and then obviously 2017 Battlegrounds, of course.
Yeah.
And the player story thing has taken on an interesting turn, and it seems to be a lot what people want from their games now. And I think there is a great potential for this game to have a lot of player stories, but there's just too much shit in the way. You look at PUBG or Hitman, not at all similar games, but great sandboxes with nothing really in the way that stops you from, or nothing that gets in the way of player story, right?
Yeah.
Like, Hitman has objectives and you can go and do some of these fun, goofy ways to kill people, but it's all just sort of off to the side just enough that you can also just play it however you want. And I think they should have done that instead of what they did. And they're definitely not going to make another one because, well, maybe they might do like a prequel, but the main plot with White Dude, whatever his name is very much over at the end of this game. It very much feels like that's it for Shadow of whatever games. I think it would have been better as something simpler, something that was more focused on just the cool system that they had made.
Yeah.
I don't know. I want to say it's harmless, but it's not, because the loot box stuff is terrible and disgusting. And also there's just, I feel sort of, I don't even know what the right words are here. I feel like video games, there's so many like tropes in this game of like general video game design. It's like open world, skill tree, this type of combat, this type of climbing, fort defense, microtransactions. It's just like I could do without some of these modern game trends, and all of them are in this game.
That's what puts me off it, I think.
And I think that's very fair. I feel like, I remember the reviews, like it's a well-reviewed game, and I feel like the devs and the people reviewing the game, they should like expect better almost, in a way where it's like, the devs were really innovative with this Nemesis system, but like everything else surrounding it is just so boring, and like they're not good video game design, or they were maybe good video game design ideas, but like 2017, they just feel so worn out.
Yeah.
And some of them wear me out, like the microtransaction stuff, and just general like open world with like 5 different types of collectibles and a skill tree with 100 different skills on it. It's like you can do better.
Yeah, it's like
I don't know.
I don't know how long until the general population hits the fatigue with whatever you want to call the Ubisoft Collectathon sandbox experience, that format. Right. I don't know how long until people hit the wall, but I've hit the wall. Me and you might not represent the average player because we play too much. Probably played too much Assassin's Creed, or just too many Ubisoft titles in general. So we're worn down by these systems, and I guess some people aren't. Some people are still content with it, but I wish that would stop and people would innovate.
Yeah, and like, you know, lots of people are, but it just feels like it just feels dated in a way, or not maybe not even dated, but like just a bit of a please stop scenario. I don't know. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's a terrible game. It's I think it's solid and has a lot of good stuff in it, but I think the overall package is just sort of, like I said, tiring. Yeah, I didn't hate it, but it was just sort of. When I was done, I was glad to be done. Oof. And it's very possible that if I had not played it in such a short period of time, you know, because it was like, there's a lot of other games coming out that are probably going to be a lot more interesting. So I was like, I'm just going to get this fucking thing out of the way and play it all in a week, basically. If I had stretched it out, paced myself a bit better, I probably would have had a better time with it as well. I wouldn't have gotten so frustrated with the with all the systems. But that's,
if I ever touch it, it will be during a dark time of the year when nothing else is out, and I have a strange, strange craving for something along those lines.
I don't even know if you need to bother. I don't know.
We'll see. Sometimes I get in very specific game moods, and maybe it will clash with one of those.
That's fair. Yeah, and I was very much in the mood for mindless checklist stuff for 10 or 12 hours with that game. Which, you know, if you bought it for like $10 and played 10 hours, and then we're like, okay, I'm good. You know, that's all right. But did not do a lot for me. I've cooled off on it a little bit. I was pretty pissed off at it last week because I did all the terrible story stuff. But that's it. Whatever. That's it. Whatever. That's my consensus. Whatever.
All right. I think that was a good way to round it off.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to The Evil Within 2. Yeah. No, you did not play this. Not your bag, right?
Well, actually.
Wait, what?
I might have bought it on Friday.
Really?
I might have played 6 hours of it.
Really?
In secret.
Oh my god, you never keep secrets in these reviews.
For exactly this purpose.
Oh my god.
I deliberately stayed silent.
Oh my god, after all these years, you got me.
Yeah.
Shit.
I don't know. I was just like, one night I was just like, I'd heard some things about it, seen a little bit, and I was like, you know.
Oh, mate, you have completely thrown a spanner in my works here. I had this single-person review staggered out and figured out, but all right, I'm adaptable. Let's make this into a bit of a dual review. This is interesting. Okay, well,
gotcha.
You did get me. All right, I'm going to start off by just summarizing the first game and I think were the problems with the first game. And
please do.
Why no one really played it. So
I don't know if we've ever talked about Evil Within.
It might have slipped. Actually, it might have made it onto my top 10 of 2014.
Oh, you know what? It was.
Lowdown?
Yeah, you're right. It was. Well, I've completely forgotten that. That was years ago. Anyways, go ahead. Take it away.
The Evil Within The original was a survival horror game, which I feel like no one in the world played, or at least no one I know, because I never get to talk about it. It had some pretty severe problems. It wasn't attractive. It had a pretty poor frame rate. I played it early days on the PS4 when it was forced letterboxing, which was a weird choice. It just, especially with the camera setup, it just really narrowed what you can see. And some of the design around survival horror is to make the game more difficult on purpose or more awkward, like the Resident Evil games make it so you can't shoot while moving on purpose, so it's awkward. But the letterboxing didn't complement the game, in my opinion, and just made it look a bit shitty. And I think the worst offender of the first game was the story. It was completely nonsensical. It plays out similar to the second game, where it's all featured inside a computer system called STEM. But the problem with the first game is that is actually like a reveal quite far into the game that you're in a computer system. So for a lot of the first game, you have absolutely no idea what is going on, why the world is crumbling, and why there's monsters anywhere. So like halfway through the game, I just gave up on the story. And then there's some cutscenes explaining the story, the main villain, and I just wasn't really paying attention. I didn't know what was going on for the whole thing.
I watched a summary of the plot.
Oh, did you?
I thought, wow, that's very Japanese.
Yes. It goes to like Metal Gear Solid territory. It's just kind of bizarre.
Pretty wacky stuff in it. Kind of interesting, but pretty wacky.
Yeah. The thing that kept me going, I really enjoyed the boss designs in the first game. They're horrifying, disturbing, and really varied and interesting. There's a lot of bosses in the first game that are really memorable. And I enjoyed the gunplay in the first game, even on a controller. I don't know how far into Evil Within 2 when you get all the weapons and the variation, but they had all of those in the first game, from the crossbows with all the strange attachments, shotguns, pistols, rifles, all that stuff, which made it interesting and varied for combat. So for me, I pushed through the first one and I had a mostly good time. Second one. I wasn't sure about the second one. I saw a lot of footage before it came out of Sebastian, the main guy, just wandering around a town, and it didn't really have any of what I enjoyed about the first game, which was interesting and gross locations and enemies. It just had a guy wandering around some streets, and I was a bit apprehensive, especially when I heard they had made it, or some of it, open world-esque. And I was like, kind of shouting back to your shadow.
Video games.
Yes.
Open world is hot right now.
Another trope. And I thought they were like trying to please the people. But it turns out making the area open and giving the player some more choice in how they approach things was actually a really, really positive choice.
It sort of seems like they made Resident Evil 4 in a lot of ways. Wasn't RE4 kind of like, you can wander around a town?
I haven't played 4 in a long time.
I haven't played 4, so
I do not believe there was very large areas, but I know what you're saying. There was like a block of houses, and you could navigate in your own way. But in this one, you have an entire town.
Yeah. A town that is fractured into a bunch of pieces in really weird ways.
Yes. First of all, I'm going to go into the story of Evil Within 2, because I've beaten it, and then we will both discuss what you think of the combat and how the open world stuff works. So the nice thing about Evil Within 2 is it's focused, explained, and it's simple if you want it to be simple. The core of the story is your daughter, who you think is dead, and your character is very guilty about her being burnt in a house fire. That's not true. She's, for some reason, the center of the STEM system, and she's gone missing, and you have to go in and rescue her. Kind of weird. It's a strange setup.
The STEM system is like the Matrix, except it's hosted by someone, and everyone else that goes into the world sits in a bathtub full of milk.
Yes.
Yeah. And she's the host of this world, right? I think.
But what's nice about the story is it's really focused on one thing, which is get your daughter and get out. And along the way, there are side quests where you can find out more about Mobius, which is the evil corporation. You can find out more backstory about the characters, the STEM system itself. But they format it in a way where it's completely optional. And if you want to beeline through the game, all you have to worry about is get your daughter and get out. which I really liked. I really liked the way they did that. I think they understood that people didn't really know what was going on in the first game. I actually did the same thing as you and watched a recap, even though I played the game, and I learned things that I didn't even notice when I actually played through the game.
Did you play the DLC expansions?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Were those any better?
Still didn't know what was going on. I had no idea.
Okay.
But I don't want to go too much into detail since you're actually playing it, and we'll see if you are going to see it through. But one more thing I want to compliment about the game is they actually do a pretty good job with characters. I was quite surprised. As you go through the game, you meet members of the evil corporation from Mobius, and none of them are bad people. They're just people who got hired, they got a job because they needed to pay the bills, and they're also stuck in this shitty situation with you, which I thought was quite good, because it's very easy for games to be like, this corporation is evil, they're the bad guys, you must get them. You must get them dead. But no, everyone who works for the corporation that you bump into has their own little story, and it has a small arc, and kind of an obvious spoilers, but some of them get killed off, and I was like bummed out about it when some of them got killed off. I was genuinely attached to some of them, and in the first game I didn't give a shit. And the main character and the secondary character, which is Kidman, who helps you get into the bath, they have pretty good arcs across the story. Again, I won't go into spoilers, but they go through a good journey, and it ends pretty satisfyingly. And
cool.
Just to quickly summarize, good, understandable story, likable characters, and
what a concept.
Enjoyable, which was very strange compared to the first one.
Good. That's good to hear.
Just having a sip of water. But after summarizing the story, we should move into the main section of the game, which is the open world sandbox. Open world in quotation marks because it's just a city. Section of the game, which I think is around 70 to 60%. No, 70% of the game is you're just in a town and you have a destination and you have to figure out how you want to get through the town. Do you want to fight people or do you want to sneak around? But I'm going to pass it over to you now because I'm really interested in how your first few hours have gone.
So I've done about 5 hours. I just finished I think I just started chapter 6, where I just finished the section with the weird sort of three-legged camera monster lady who really sounds like she's taking great pleasure in chasing you about.
There's actually like a note that corresponds to her, and there is like sexual undertones to the way that cameraman worked with women. So it's very uncomfortable and bizarre. Yeah.
There's a lot of uncomfortable and bizarre stuff in this game.
Yes.
Which I think we can get to that in a minute. The open... I mean, it's not like... it's an open world, but it's... I've only seen like the first part of that where you're just in that starting zone before you sort of... I presume it comes back, but right now I just did a long section of pretty linear story stuff.
It takes a while to get started to begin with.
Yeah, but I mean, I spent a decent amount of time in that first open area part of the town where there's little side quests, and I encountered the monster that can just walk through walls and hums all about.
She sucks.
In one of the houses, and then now she's like wandering around in the world randomly, which is unfortunate. Should not have let her out. That part is surprising because when I think of the first game, I think I played maybe the demo of the first game, or 20 minutes of the demo of the first game. The game is mostly in an insane asylum, I think.
Yes.
And, that's a pretty linear, corridor-heavy space.
Yeah, when I was thinking back, I don't actually know if you had the option to not kill anyone. I think just to progress, you had to mostly murder people. I think even doors were locked behind you clearing out a room of people. So combat was really, really enforced in the first game.
Just hyper-linear, that surprised me. I did not know that was... the case until after release. It was part of the thing that led me to being interested in playing it. It sounded very different, and I like that stuff. I like that you can you get these little radio transmissions when you're walking about, and sometimes it's just like, here's a spot where there's some bullets, and here's a weird call for help coming from a house. And then you go into the house and discover there's a horrible monster that can walk through walls. Sort of, I presume that's a side quest.
Yes.
That is quite neat, and it's nice to be able to sneak about, or you can just run past all these enemies and eventually lose them, or just sort of explore at your leisure. It's I was surprised by that aspect of it, and it's I like that part of it.
Yeah, me too.
It's sort of, it breaks it up, because there's lots of stretches where it does get pretty linear and quarter heavy, like when you're in the Marrow. Those sections are like super linear, tight corridors, which as someone that doesn't handle horror very well, I like the open air nature of the city stuff, because it's a lot harder to get snuck up on by a spooky ghost. And there's not like a lot of stuff, but there's like just enough where it's like, oh, while I'm walking to this, I might as well stop here, and
enough
do
breadcrumbs to lead you off the trail.
Yeah. That part's neat. It plays fine. It's a third-person survival horror game. They're never great playing games, because that's sort of part of what they are, I think.
Yeah.
Or not. It's not that they're great. They're not great playing. It feels sometimes a little frustrating when it's like, just stop swaying, reticle.
Yes.
Let me just shoot these guys in the head. But like, it's a survival horror game. That's part of it. Resident Evil 7. Very much hard to hit headshots. Last of Us, same thing. I would say this is not, like, The Last of Us is probably the best playing of these games that I've played, especially versus Evil Within 2. But the gameplay is solid, fine. The upgrade stuff is nice. I'm glad that there's a big upgrade tree. I think Resident Evil 7 sort of had like a couple of basic upgrades that you could get, whereas like reduced weapon sway, like a syringe or something. I don't even remember.
I don't remember either.
There were a couple of things like that, but that was it. Not a lot of RPG sort of elements from that game. I like that there's a good size skill tree, weapon upgrades. I like a survival horror game. I discovered with Resident Evil 7, I like a survival horror game where you can become a lot more competent as the game goes on. I like that you can upgrade your stuff and get stronger, and that they give you a lot of guns to shoot at. And honestly, I haven't had a problem with bullets thus far either.
No, it is pretty generous.
Yeah.
But again,
which is
I think
nice.
that's part of the system. In the first game, not every enemy dropped the green goo, which lets you level up. And in this game, I think they created a system where you always have a choice. If you engage in combat, you will most likely use some bullets, but you gain green goo. Or you can save a bullets and not get green goo, which I think was a wise choice. Because if you're low on ammo, well, you don't have to fight anyone, but you ain't going to be able to level up.
Yeah, it's a nice amount. I associate these games with like hyperlinearity mainly because of stuff like
scripted
Resident
horror.
Evil, scripted horror. Yeah. So it's nice to have a surprising number of elements of choice, not only in combat and stealth, but also upgrades and item management, stuff like that. It's nice not having like a really small inventory.
Yeah.
I haven't, I would definitely like to have more bullets, but I think I have 30 pistol shots or something right now.
Yeah, and you can find pistol pouches later on, which expand your thing, and they're collectibles, usually hidden in dangerous areas and stuff like that.
Yeah, which is nice. I wish I've been playing Divinity Original Sin 2 a whole bunch, and that game has a nice system that I wish actually a lot of games had, which is you can bring up your map and you can place a marker on your map anywhere, and then you can put as many as you want, and for each marker you can write a little note.
Okay.
So it's like I wish this game had it, because I wish I could, like, when I come across a big health kit and I'm full. I can't pick it up.
Yeah.
I wish I could open my map and plop a marker down and be like, big health kit here, so that I could
they
come
could
back
have
to
let
it
you
at some
scan
point.
it with your radio thing. Because
Yeah,
if
or
you
just
find the
mark it
fallen
in some
bodies
form.
and you don't pick up the loot, they stay on the map.
Right. Yeah, so I wish this had some sort of ability to easily just put a little marker on the map of some sort and just say, there's a thing here. You know, Zelda did the same thing, Breath of the Wild. Not note writing, and the symbols were weird, but you could, you would sort out your own symbol system where it's like a star is a shrine, a chest is a chest, a skull is a heavy, hard to kill enemy, stuff like that. I've only come across wanting to do that maybe once or twice in this game so far, and it's like, I'm sure on a harder difficulty I would really want to be able to go back and find that health kit, but on normal it's sort of like, whatever. I'll live
it feels
without finding
bad
it.
when like you've been specifically using your pistol to conserve ammo, and then you find like 5 shotgun bullets which you can't pick up because you haven't been using your shotgun because you're trying to conserve ammo. It feels really bad.
Yeah, so I wish you could put a little marker down. It would just make my OCD more content. But that's a small complaint. Okay. I should say, like, the reason I got this, I found it cheap. B, I was thinking, I liked Resident Evil 7 quite a bit.
Discovering a new genre, maybe. Not that far.
And I had also heard on the latest Bombcast, I think it was, the fellow that's playing it, he said there's like some sort of Hannibal-inspired body horror and some sort of weird Twin Peaksian sort of stuff, and I'm like, fuck it, I'll give this a try. Why not? I like those things.
Yeah.
And I survival horror game. It's a weird thing to say. Like, I'm enjoying it much as I can enjoy a horror game, which is not a lot. I don't handle horror well in games, but I am enjoying it. I've got the volume turned down a little bit more than maybe I normally do.
The thing is, I wouldn't even say it's that scary. The linear parts push some scary, spooky bosses onto you, but the main open world stuff, I think they do a good job of balancing the power level that you have as a player. It kind of reminded me of the power level of Metal Gear Solid 5, where if you take your time, you scout the area, and you plan out properly, then you're probably going to win. You're probably going to kick some ass. But there will always be times where you're not paying attention, you get spotted, and then you're panicking, you're running, and you're trying to damage control.
And that's just a mess of shooting.
I'll let you summarize, because I've got a few more things to talk about further in this game.
I liked that aspect. That's part of why I like Resident Evil 7 a lot, was because it's like, you start off and you're weak and miserable, and that game's got a lot of spooky stuff in it, but by the end of it, you're very strong, very, very equipped, and then replaying that game, I replayed it a couple times because it was like, this game is now not scary. It's just like a series of events that I know are happening, and I'm just swatting them out of the way like it's nothing. And this is not nearly as, it's definitely not as spooky as something like RE7, because it's not first person, even though that mod looks pretty cool.
Yeah, I want to try that.
And I do want to try it as well. The open world stuff isn't terribly spooky. The linear corridor stuff obviously is more spooky because a tighter field of view, and it's a claustrophobic environment. The third person aspect reduces a lot of the spookiness of it because
peek around corners and stuff.
I can just look around corners. But that game has a pretty good general creepiness going on. There's good dread. There's not been really a lot of jump scares. There
isn't really. There's a few, of course, but they really don't overdo it at all.
But there's a good dread throughout that whole game, and there's one thing I didn't even know happened in this game was there's a lot of really cool environment switching that happens. Sort of like, do you remember Antechamber?
Yes.
Did you ever play Antechamber? Where
I did.
You
it was very confusing.
Walk into a room, non-Euclidean environment, you walk in a circle, and the room is completely changed. That was cool. This game, there's a lot of stuff like that in this game where...
Trippy, yeah.
Where you just... like you take a picture and the in the picture there's a hallway, and then you take the picture and now there's suddenly a real hallway there, or as you're walking down something, it changes behind you. And that stuff, I really like that stuff. It's really well done. It's completely seamless. I actually find it really impressive just from a tech point of view that they're doing these like pretty grand environment changes at times, and you don't even notice it happening. You just turn around and it's a completely different place. I like that. And there's some good like gross unpleasantries in this game, like right early on when you go into the house and the mother is like force feeding her dad's corpse son, and she like smashes his nose on the table, and it accurately like indents his face.
Yeah, his
and
nose
he's
is
like covered in vomit, and I was just like, this is fucking disgusting. It's got a good sense of dread and miserable creativity, I think. Like it's the horror in it is, I would say, fairly different from what I am used to from modern horror games. You can tell it's Japanese. Like they have this certain sensibilities, a good sense of surrealness and weirdness that works really well. In Japanese horror is always been pretty interesting because it's so different from North American horror. And Resident Evil 7 was very North American horror for the most part. This is nice. It's nice to play a game that is a horror game, but is like fucking weird a lot of the times. There's a giant camera Lovecraft monster floating in the sky right now, and it's like, okay, sure. I was surprised by that aspect, and surprised at how gross some of it is. Like the corpses you find in the picture boxes or whatever, with their brains blown out, and you're like, this is a lot more accurate and realistic than I was expecting. And,
there's some really disturbing stuff later on.
Good.
Just nasty.
For as ugly as the game kind of is, because it's id Tech 5 based engine, they do a lot of good stuff with it visually. I think they've got a good visual style and a lot of good use of effects. Hellblade did a good job, good use of trippy effects. I found Observer, which I played a little bit of, did not do a good job using trippy effects. It was just overwhelming and messy. And this has a good use of weird effects and trippiness. And I have been very pleasantly surprised by it thus far, and I've been enjoying it. And we'll see it through to the end.
Wow.
I think, because I don't think it's much more than 15 or so hours.
Yes, I finished it in 14, and I did every side quest.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's good.
Have you encountered a boss fight yet? Because I know you are not a fan of boss fights, usually.
I don't know. I don't... maybe? I don't know. Like...
Have you encountered the weird... Not at the beginning, but the buzzsaw lady?
Oh, yeah. That I had to blow her up right before the... the camera lady got introduced before going into City Hall. Yeah, I had to blow her up. I don't know. I just treated it like I treated the Resident Evil bosses, which was I just used all my ammo on it and then it died. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I was going to transition on to summarizing the bosses in the game, because in the first game it's a very large part of it, and in this game it's there's a lot less of them, which was a slight negative for me. But I actually surprisingly had a positive experience with every boss in this game. And with the kind of janky movement the game has, I don't think that's always easy, because your guy kind of moves strange and odd on purpose, and you don't have much stamina to run away. And I had a pretty good time with all the boss fights. Okay. You can kind of cheese them a bit. You just use cover, and they're kind of bad at going around things.
Yeah, I noticed that already. They're a little...
Yeah, you kind of hug a corner and then move to a different corner. But not finding bosses frustrating is nice, because I don't know if I talked about this publicly. I think this was on the Patreon podcast, or maybe I did talk about this somewhere, but I found the Resident Evil 7 bosses very frustrating.
Oh, really? Okay.
I didn't enjoy them because the movement in 7 is even more restrictive, and I don't think they complemented the player's movements. And somehow in this game, they just kind of balanced it right so that I wasn't frustrated. I felt still in control, that power level thing I was referencing before. And there's about 4 or 5 of them, and I like them. I liked all of them, especially the last boss in the game I thought was really kind of epic.
Yeah, cool. The I did notice in that one Chainsaw Lady boss fight, it was like, okay, I can feel the movement in combat kind of falling apart a little bit, where it's like, this is not meant for this type of action. But if there's only a few of them, that's fine.
Yeah, there's a camera one, which is good fun because you don't have to kill her, you just have to avoid her.
Right, yeah, I did.
I won't spoil any, but there's a few more after that, and then there's one final boss, which I thought was really, really cool design-wise, and some of the things that it does. I think just to summarize or round off a few more points, as the game goes on, the open world gets more and more just fucked up as it degrades over time. And they just start to throw more variety of enemies. I think right now for you is probably just the normal humanoid type zombie
normal
things.
Humans. There's a tall, lanky
the spitter thing
lady. I don't know. It's a spitter. That's what I presumed.
Yeah.
And there's a little horrible dog thing that it takes like 7
Oh
shotgun
god,
shots to kill.
those things are the worst. And they make horrible noises. Yeah, later on adds a bit more variety. They actually start to merge some mini bosses in the area, which really mixes things up because they eat so much ammo and they're just really horrible, and they're obviously designed to kind of run to the player's position and just try and sniff you out, and they make really horrifying noises. There's a flame-based enemy later on who has horrible breathing sounds, and you just hear him clomping towards you, and there's like 3 of them on the map, so you don't want to really fight them all. But if you do, you get to have a flamethrower. But you don't have to. You don't have to. Yeah. But if you beat them all, you get a flamethrower. So I really like the progression of the world. As you get into the end stages, it's really, really annihilated. And I was going to talk about a final sequence of the game because I didn't think you were ever going to play it. I didn't think you were ever going to touch The Evil Within 2, so I might not talk about it. But there's a sequence in the end which I think is probably inspired by Inception. And
cool.
Well, I'll give you some. I'll paint a picture without trying to ruin it.
Which part of Inception is it inspired by?
When it's switching between the layers and the perspectives of the people in the different dream worlds.
Okay, I can imagine what context that would be in Evil Within.
Yes,
but in Evil, reality.
But there's a bit at the end. This is a mild spoiler, but it's still fun. There's a bit at the end where you get to play as 2 different people in 2 different layers. And they both have tasks, and it keeps switching and transitioning between them.
That's cool.
And I was actually really surprised by the last 2 hours of the game. It keeps the variation of enemies going. Really awesome final boss. And then surprisingly cinematic. I was not expecting it to get so dramatic and interesting at the end.
That's cool to hear.
And
it doesn't do the MGS4 split screen where you have like you're playing in the bottom half and there's a cutscene in the top half. That'd be cool.
No, it doesn't.
Nothing
but it merges like playing as 2 people, merges cutscenes together, and it's a cool ending. Really, really well done.
Neat.
Also, the main Mobius guy, I don't know if you've seen him yet, but he really looks like, again, the CEO of EA. He really looks like him.
Oh god!
I'm just gonna.
I don't think I have. I saw someone sitting on a couch during a scene with what's her name, where they were like in the observation room, and there was like a guy with 2 cronies. Maybe that's him. I don't know. I definitely haven't met anyone like that.
I'm just gonna quickly scroll through my notes, see if I missed anything. Obviously, for me, switching from PS4 to PC is an improvement. Playstyle wise, it just feels better to play it on a mouse and keyboard. I turned off all that auto aim stuff, so it's kind of scary, and you need to, have some good FPS aim, otherwise you're gonna get bit. It's much better than a controller. Got looting and scavenging is actually rewarding. You get a little reward if you go out your way and you go off the beaten path and you start looking around in houses. I think they did a good job of spreading stuff out and pushing the player in all these different directions. And I think that's about it. I do have a few negatives. I don't understand what was the point behind the cover controls, where you press space and then you have to hold a directional arrow to switch around the cover. because if you're not in cover and you just hug the wall, it gives you free control, and it does the same thing. It accomplishes you being hidden from the enemy. I don't understand.
I've only used cover during that tutorial sequence. Like you can just crouch walk behind everything, and it's fine.
I don't understand why that's in there, and I do not recommend using it because
I used it in the first-person sequence, the first one where you have the gas mask.
Oh my god, that bit was awful.
I used it to peek around a corner and wait for the lady to just walk by.
I completely forgot about that, but that was such a strange segment. It was like 30 minutes. I didn't like it, and then it never came back again.
Oh, really? Oh, weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that was about.
I wonder if you would like it more if you turn that mod on and play the whole thing in first person.
Maybe. It just felt... I think it's because I got sighted. I got spotted, so I had to get into combat with a knife, and it just felt really just jagged and awful.
Yeah, that sounds pretty bad.
Yes, it wasn't. Okay. It wasn't fun. But there's some pretty terrible facial animation stuff when they're having conversations with characters. It looks bad, and some of the writing is over the top and cheesy and laughable. But apart from that, I think it surprised me. It was a really positive experience. I enjoyed following along the story because I could follow it this time. I enjoyed the sandbox type stuff. I actually enjoyed the linear story missions. And yeah, it was overall a good package, and it wasn't a bit of a mess like the last one.
Right, yeah.
I wasn't really expecting it to be kind of well put together.
No, I will say I have had a few little weird janky things. I had an invisible enemy attacking me at one point.
Okay.
I had a hard crash last night. Like I've had a few bugs. But whatever. It auto saves enough that it didn't really bother me. There's a little bit of jank to it. But yeah, I was not expecting, it's a Bethesda game that's not Fallout or Skyrim, so there's no fanfare, of course, of it being released.
Yeah.
So it just sort of came out, and then only like a week later did it sound like, oh, this actually sounds like it's a pretty good game. And having not paid any attention to Evil Within, I am surprised by how solid it is. Yeah, it's and aspects of it are genuinely quite good and surprising. Like the weird horror of it is, and the open world is pretty cool. It seems like a very solid game. I would say even of the 3 games that we are talking about today, it's probably the one I've liked the most.
Me too.
Actually, I would say it is the one I've liked the most, even though, enjoyment is not exactly something I would associate with a survival horror game. It's not like a pleasure to play it because it's a miserable horror game, but it's, you know what I mean.
Overcoming the odds against you can be satisfying.
Yeah.
They just did an overall good job of balancing the game. And also, it just has, I think you might have mentioned this, it just has quite kind of a fun personality. I don't know if you've ever stumbled upon one of the zombies just doing some weird stuff, but they have some scripted moments where a zombie is just swinging a corpse against a wall. Just, I don't know what he's trying to accomplish, but he's just acting like a fool. And there's just a fun level of
some of the item descriptions are kind of funny.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of silly Easter eggs, which are from different Bethesda games. You can find stuff from Doom and Wolfenstein. So there's always kind of this undertone of silliness to the game, which is nice.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Surprising. Yeah. Surprisingly good.
Yes, I very much so.
Okay, finally, moving on to South Park: The Fractured Butthole, the sequel to The Stick of Truth, which I think we both played through.
Yes, yeah. Another sequel to a 2014 game. All 3 of these games, holy shit, they're all sequels to 2014 games.
Oh, yeah.
I just realized. And all of them were on one or both of our Game of the Year lists in 2014.
Well,
interesting.
Should we just quickly summarize what we thought of The Stick of Truth?
Oh, disclosure.
Oh, yeah.
It was provided by Ubisoft. Our copy was provided by Ubisoft. The end.
So Stick of Truth. I like the first game. I'm a big fan of the show, even though I'm a few years behind on it. I thought the combat was fine in the first game. It was kind of a rudimentary turn-based combat system, which was just to host...
With weapons, I think. It was weapon-based combat system as well. Anyways, yeah.
Oh, yes, yeah. But the game, the main focus of The Stick of Truth was the writing and the absurdity and just kind of breaking the mold of normal video game narratives and being like, we're South Park, fuck you, this is what we're gonna do. And
it was a very tight, 12 hours, that's what my Steam account says. It was like a really tight, linear, fucking bonkers, very surprising game. I think a big part of why it was so likable was because it was like, holy shit, they did it. They made a South Park game. And that is like as crazy as South Park and looks exactly like South Park.
There was also a big novelty for fans of the show to be able to walk around the town for the first time and explore it at your will. This time, I'm sure people have seen the trailers and they know it's the same thing, but a different focus. It's superheroes instead of fantasy. I think they've done a bit of a switcheroo where they put focus on making a better combat system and slightly toning down on the writing and narrative and what progresses in the story. I've beaten the game, and I don't believe you have you? I'll let you go first, because I have some things to say about some things.
So do I. I played, I think close to probably 8 hours. I don't know, maybe it's six or 8 hours. I finished the second night where you go to the warehouses and you get something. I don't even remember. And I'm not going to play any more of it. I've pretty much given up on it. I will say I am not I don't want to say I'm not a South Park fan, but like I've never watched the show with any sort of consistency. I've seen the movie, I've seen the main episodes, the famous ones, Mel Gibson throwing his shit everywhere, the ones that live on in infamy I've seen, and in the past have very much enjoyed South Park. I especially like when they focus less on, socio-political stuff and just more be like, we're just going to do fucking insane, offensive, weird things. And Stick of Truth was full of stuff like that. As someone that wasn't very familiar with a lot of South Park, it was very surprising. Alien abductions, crab people, Nazi cows, all sorts of insane stuff. And I really, really liked the Stick of Truth. I thought the combat was simple and efficient and didn't overstay its welcome. There wasn't like too much of it. I don't remember if there were side quests. I think there were.
I think so.
Either way, the first game was, I thought, a great surprise and a very tight, very enjoyable package that it felt like the writing, especially, they really just went for it in a way that, like the same way they just sort of go for it with the movie, where it's just like, we don't know if we're ever going to be allowed to make another one of these. Let's put everything in it. And so the South Park, I think, Stick of Truth is great, and I think South Park has been and can be and might still be capable of being pretty great. That being said, I really don't like the fractured butthole. I think it is fundamentally unfunny, personally, which obviously comedy is very subjective and probably the hardest thing to write of anything. Like, I would say to write something that makes you laugh is harder than writing something that makes you cry or feel anger or fear. I think comedy is incredibly difficult. So I don't want to blame them too much. But I just think it's not funny at all. I think I laughed maybe once in the 8 hours, and I enjoyed the running gag of the main character never speaking, because the way people react to his silence is hilarious. Just like they get uncomfortable and just like make decisions because he doesn't say anything. I think it's a really good gag. But everything else I find completely unfunny and like really try-hardy in a way that feels inappropriate.
I wouldn't say try-hardy. I was thinking about this, and I think the beginning section of the game is low-hanging fruit when it comes to South Park.
Yeah, maybe that's the better.
It starts off with strippers and racist policemen, which, when it comes to like political commentary, is very rudimentary and my first edgy joke type stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like, haha, he's racist. Is that supposed to be funny? Like, no. Like, oh, this guy is talking to you about like being confused about gender and sexuality. Haha. Yeah. It's like, oh, okay, I guess. Also, I don't find fart humor very funny, and there's a lot of it in this game.
Yeah, there is a lot.
But also, I think the gameplay aspects of it just... I don't think the combat... I think the combat is more expanded, but I have not enjoyed it. Not really at all. I think part of that is due to me playing... two other games that are turn-based. Just came off of Mario Rabbids, and I'm still playing Divinity, which are the two polar opposites of the spectrum of turn-based.
Yeah.
This is sort of in the middle of being simple, but with a lot of variety. I just find the combat to be like really slow and really boring, and there was way too much of it. And all the quests that aren't the main quests are like really like fetch questy, and I was so bored. I was like very nearly falling asleep during like multiple play sessions, which doesn't happen for me ever with games. And I was just like, I was just actively bored by the entire affair. And I think even if I was really engaged, or engaged enough by playing it, I wouldn't have carried through because I was finding it so not entertaining from a writing perspective. Even if I know what you might say, it really picks up in the last third or whatever, I still don't think I would ever want to play all the way through to it. So I don't know, how do you feel having beaten the whole thing?
I ended up really, really enjoying the Fractured Butthole. I understand your criticisms, and I think they are fair. It feels like with the first game, they were like, here's our cards. This is what we can do as South Park. Bask in our horrible glory. And for the second game, it really felt like they wanted to actually craft a South Park episode, where it starts off kind of like a normal day for some kids, and then it spirals into madness, which obviously results in problems for some people, because the first half of the game in comparison to the Stick of Truth will be strange for some people. They'll be expecting more than just the fact that policemen don't like black people and there's strippers sitting on your face and you're farting. I pushed through. I actually did enjoy the combat. I can't really be bothered to go into details. You can probably see from the gameplay footage how it works. It's grid-based, and there's some minor strategy to putting your party in the right positions to not be hit by attacks, or setting them up to do some attacks 2 turns in the future. And I mostly enjoyed it. They introduced some novelties where you have to do your turns in real time because you're being chased.
Oh God, I hated those.
I actually quite like that. And then later
it's
on,
like the sorry, you just reminded me that was there, and I wanted to just say, like, I think it goes against the core of what a turn-based strategy game is.
Yeah.
And it's just like I understand it, it's a twist on it, but I was so frustrated by that stripper section. I think I had to replay it 4 times or something. And because I kept forgetting, because my brain is like, oh, it's turn-based, whatever. I have all the time in the world. I really was frustrated by that. Anyways, carry on.
Yeah, further on, they kind of they pull out a few more tricks, a few more novelties where you have to keep your players in a certain position. There was a level where you had to push enemies into a specific segment to get destroyed. I would have liked more of that. As you go along, you eventually, spoiler, unlock every single power in the game. So it's really up to you to kind of mix and match what you want to use, and you eventually have like 8 to 10 options when it comes to your party. But I really found towards the end, I'd found what I liked. I had like 2 healers. My ultra or ultimate was a good healing thing, and the rest was just DPS stuff. And I was like, I feel secure. I can keep people alive and keep dealing out damage. And I like my powers. So the problem was, for like the last 3 hours, I didn't really change up my powers, which again could be my bad for not experimenting. But you do experiment as you go along, and I found something that worked consistently, and I didn't fail once throughout the entire game. I never lost a battle.
Oh, wow.
I think that might be because I came off Persona 5 recently, where I really felt confident in my party composition and how to be a very tanky party which doesn't die. I can just grind out battles, and I kind of built that in South Park.
Yeah.
But some battles towards the end go on for like 40 minutes, and it's just the same cycle of healing, resurrecting, beating people down, charming people. And some people have interesting powers. I don't know if you got there, but when you get Butters, he can call in a Mexican worker. Again, that was quite low-hanging fruit for South Park. I thought that Mexicans would work for cheap labor and all that stuff. I feel like they should have just gone a little bit further with the variation, or just cut back on how many battles you do, because it got a little bit tedious by the end of the game, but I did end up enjoying it more than the Stick of Truth. It's hard to talk about the progression of the story without really ruining it for people, because you want to be like, this happens, look how crazy South Park is, but the revelation of those things is the fun. It takes
the shock of them doing something absurd is a huge part of it. Yeah.
It does take too long. I think the next night from where you are is where like the whole police thing rounds off, and them capturing black people is the main thing again. And then once it gets to the next night, it actually starts to get a bit more creative, where you go to a genetics lab and all sorts of mutated shit starts happening. And then after that, it just goes fucking mad, and it just doesn't really make any sense in a way that's
good
kind
to
of
hear.
fun. And there's like time travel and all sorts of crazy bullshit that goes on because your kid can fuck back in time and into the future. So it gets really crazy at the end, but it obviously takes too long to get going. Because if it hadn't, you as a casual South Park viewer and a fan of Stick of Truth would have stuck around.
Like I've heard it's up to 30 hours long, this game, which is insane. To do if you did all the side quests. Even a 20-hour game,
I reckon I was 20.
Like that's already like 8 hours longer than I spent with the Stick of Truth. So it definitely took too long.
It does get good at the end. I think it goes
That's
really.
good to hear.
I'm gonna do a spoiler section here. So anyone who hasn't played through the Fractured Butthole, skip forward like a few minutes or so. I think
we would put an annotation on screen if we could.
Fucking YouTube took it away. So skip forward like 2 minutes. But there's a really, really good section in the game where you're in a room and you need some of your parents' genetics to get through a certain barrier. And your parents have been kidnapped, and you have to make the choice of decapitating your dad using a laser or ripping off your mum's almost frayed off arm. And you're going between both of them, and they're both trying to make you kill the other one by saying things, and it's a really horrible moment. And when you finally make your choice, because your character does speak, he comes back downstairs, and everyone's like, wow, you fucking took your time. What the hell were you doing up there? And your character is just stone-faced through it. And it was a really horrible, dark moment that no other video game would ever dare to do. And when I got into that scene, I was like, yes, finally, South Park is doing some disgusting stuff that you don't see in other video games. This is why we're here. And that was the peak, in my opinion, of stuff that South Park does that other video games wouldn't dare go near. There was some absolute madness, but that was just like, fucking hell. It was just horrible. It was horrible. But,
meanwhile, I'm just cackling.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not going to lie, I tried to kill both of them. I ripped off my mum's arm and I went straight over to the machine to try and chop my dad's head off. I really thought it would let me, but it didn't, unfortunately.
Oh.
But I mean, it's South Park. These games are simple. It's combat and story, and I think we've gone through both of those and summarized that. I think the combat is much improved, but gets fatiguing towards the end of the game, and the writing is. It does pick up, and it does turn into what most people want from the game, but it will take too long for a lot of people. And overall, I enjoyed it as a South Park fan. It has a great ending, and by great I mean incredibly simple and anticlimactic, where they just decide, instead of doing something in South Park, they're like, well, let's just go to the next town over, and then the credits roll. Which is the way that South Park works in the show. It's everything gets resolved really simply and anticlimactic. So it felt like a South Park episode. So it'd be interesting to see what people who aren't into South Park think about the fractured butthole.
What you saying that it makes sense to me that I really bounced off of it. You know, I think the balance is wrong. It's out of whack with the amount of combat, and I just fundamentally don't find the combat very enjoyable. I liked the weapon loot-based RPG combat of the first game. It was turn-based, it wasn't grid-based, and it was about shooting or stabbing or whatever.
Yeah.
Beating with baseball bats. I enjoyed the simplicity. I think it just got a little overcomplicated. Maybe not overcomplicated. I think a lot of it is the grid system and just the frequency of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of battling. A lot.
Yeah, and hearing that it picks up in the end is good to hear. I'm not surprised by that. I'm glad to know that it's not just me that found the opening to be a little, it's you saying it's slow and you being a South Park fan, it makes sense to me that I have bounced off of it so hard.
Yeah, it just felt like my first South Park episode, if you know what I mean. Just making fun of the usual suspects. But even though it has problems, I came away really enjoying the game and believing that they could continue the franchise and that they could probably in 2 years' time make another one. I don't know how long they can make South Park fun to explore because it's the same location. There's variation in the format of the game, and social media is like a funny thing in it, which you take selfies with people, but it's still the same place. There's a pond on the left, the school and the church. I know where everything is, so I don't know how they would make exploring the town fun again, but I would still be down for another South Park game because I enjoy the writing, and while the combat wasn't perfect, it was nice to see it elevated and changed this time around.
Yeah. Good. I feel better about the game sort of now that I know it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. Because I was sort of shocked at how much I liked the Stick of Truth and how much I did not like this. So it's good to hear that it's you've enjoyed it with some caveats.
Had a good time.
Those caveats explain my distaste for it. So that's good to hear.
All right. That summarizes Shadow of War, Evil Within 2. You gave me a bit of a spook with that review, I'll tell you that. And South Park, The Fractured Butthole. But that is just the beginning of this October/November review chronicles. We're
recording this on the Monday of the Gamepocalypse week.
Yes. So, no, it's Tuesday.
Is it Tuesday? Oh,
it is Tuesday. Right. Today's the day where Destiny 2 comes out on PC.
Oh, yeah. 50 minutes.
Hidden Agenda comes out on PS4, which no one probably knows about because they haven't marketed it at all. But it's not sequel, but it's from the same people who did Until Dawn in the same format. So it's the follow-up to that game. That snuck out very quietly. And then in 3 days, on Friday, we have Wolfenstein 2, which I'll be playing. Assassin's Creed Origins, which you have just started dabbling in, and Mario Odyssey. And then I think a week later...
a week of silence, more or less.
And then very soon afterwards, we have Call of Duty World War II, which we will at least be playing the campaign section of that. And then I think Horizon's DLC is very shortly after as well.
I think it's the same day, actually. It might be November 7th. Yeah. Then the week after, I think, is Battlefront. And then it's over.
And then it's over. And then we can calm down.
This week is the big one.
Yes, this is the big one. So I assume we will have another one of these videos in 2 weeks or so. Start of November. And then obviously we'll have one at the end of November. And then it's time for the top 10 list to start being compiled together. Yeah. That's going to be interesting, actually.
It will be, yeah. It's an interesting year so far.
It's been a good year. So far. But we'll save that discussion for another time. Well, thank you guys for watching all the way to the end. Let us know in the comments below if you played any of these games, if you have any opinions, and what you are looking forward to soon. And we will be back in the not-so-distant future. See you then.